The Rise, Fall, and Rebirth of Stephon Marbury. Beijing, May 2012. 18,000 people are on their feet. A bronze statue is being unveiled outside the arena built for Olympic glory. Dennis Rodman is at the podium, and the crowd is chanting a name. Not in English, but the meaning is unmistakable. The name they are chanting is Stephon Marbury. 3 years before that moment, that same man had been sitting alone in a darkened room somewhere in America, live-streaming himself to strangers on the internet, weeping, eating Vaseline. A man who had earned more than $150 million in the NBA had been reduced to a punchline. The internet laughed. The media shook their heads. The world filed it away as yet another cautionary tale about a gifted athlete who threw it all away. That is the story most people know. But it is not the whole story, and what was left out changes everything. This is not a tale about ego, money, or squandered talent. It is a story about what happens when a system built to exploit human ability never bothers to construct a safety net for the people it uses up. To understand what happened to Stephon Marbury, you have to understand not just Brooklyn, not just New York, but Coney Island specifically, and what it actually was in the 1980s and early 1990s. It was a neighborhood sitting at the bottom of every economic ladder that mattered. Crumbling housing projects, chronic unemployment, and drugs moving through the same playgrounds where children were supposed to be learning basketball. The Marbury family had 6 children. Don, the father, worked hard. Ida, the mother, held everything together. All 4 older Marbury boys, Eric, Donnie, Norman, and Marin, played basketball seriously with genuine intent. Each one had real talent. Each one came close. Not one of them made it. By the time Stephon Xavier Marbury was old enough to dribble, the family already carried an unspoken plan. The youngest boy was different. Faster, sharper, with handles so mesmerizing that people stopped to watch. On the courts of Coney Island, where reputations are forged one summer at a time, he earned a nickname before he earned a diploma. They called him Starberry. It wasn't just a nickname. It was a prophecy, the star the Marbury family had been waiting on. That kind of inherited pressure, threaded into a person's identity before they are old enough to choose it, does not fade when the lights get brighter. It compounds. Every contract dispute and public confrontation that the media would later flatten into the word selfish had that weight underneath it. Stephon was never playing just for himself. He was playing for everyone who hadn't made it out. At Abraham Lincoln High School in Brooklyn, he became the finest point guard New York City had produced in a generation. One season at Georgia Tech, the NCAA tournament, then the 1996 NBA draft, selected 4th overall by the Milwaukee Bucks. Then, before he played a single professional game, the Bucks traded him to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Most people pass over that detail. They shouldn't. The very first transaction of his professional career was someone else deciding he belonged somewhere else. He had done nothing wrong, and the league's response was to move him like a piece on a board. 3 years later, when he demanded a trade out of Minnesota, the media called it selfishness. What they didn't say was that the league had already shown him exactly how this worked. He was not a person to be invested in, he was a transaction to be processed. Between 1999 and 2004, Marbury became one of the most valuable point guards in basketball, objectively. A 6-year deal worth $70.9 million with the Nets, then a 4-year extension between $76 and $80 million in Phoenix. Back-to-back All-Star selections, 2 All-NBA team honors, nearly 20 points and 8 assists per game. In Phoenix, he was at his sharpest, explosive, creative, capable of taking over a game before the opposition realized what was happening. These peak years are precisely what people erase when they tell his story. They skip straight to the Knicks and the chaos. But before any of that, this man could genuinely play. In January 2004, New York acquired Marbury from Phoenix, and Madison Square Garden erupted. A kid from Coney Island, coming home, playing in the building he'd watched on television as a child. The narrative wrote itself. In his first half season, the Knicks made the playoffs. The dream felt real. But what Marbury walked into was not a basketball team with a complicated star. It was a dysfunction factory running at full capacity. Isaiah Thomas, who became president of basketball operations in 2003, assembled within 5 years one of the most catastrophically mismanaged rosters in modern NBA history. Coaching changes that made no strategic sense, bad contracts stacked upon bad contracts, and a front office that confused activity with progress. A federal jury in 2007 formally determined that Madison Square Garden operated as a hostile work environment. That is not editorial opinion, it is a legal finding. The dysfunction surrounding Marbury was not incidental to his decline. It was the environment that produced it. Meanwhile, in 2006, Marbury had attempted something genuinely remarkable. A revolution priced at $14.98. Partnering with Steve and Barry's, he launched the Starbury shoe line at a time when Jordans were pushing $150. He had grown up knowing the real cost of expensive sneakers, the pressure on parents, the kids robbed walking home, the quiet humiliation of the wrong pair. The Starbury line sold millions of pairs. Independent tests found the materials comparable to shoes priced 3 to 4 times higher. Sports Illustrated named him a good guy in sports 3 separate times. It was the most meaningful thing he did with his platform. Then in 2008, Steve and Barry's filed for bankruptcy, and every store closed overnight. The revolution evaporated. And by then, everything else was collapsing too. On December 2, 2007, Don Marbury, the man who had worked his whole life so his youngest son could make it out of Coney Island, suffered a heart attack in the stands during a Knicks game. His family, not wanting to alarm Stefan before the final buzzer, waited. Don passed away after the game ended. Stefan found out when it was already over. The man who had carried the weight of an entire family's dreams on his back had been sitting in that building and was gone before Stefan even knew he needed to say goodbye. He played 8 games the rest of that season. Nobody asked why. The league does not stop for grief. By 2009, the Knicks had banned Marbury from practices and games during a prolonged contract standoff, paid him $21 million to sit in the stands of opposing arenas like a spectator, and watched as his own teammates publicly declared they didn't consider him a teammate. He eventually forfeited roughly $2 million, was released, signed briefly with the Celtics, and faded out of the NBA without ceremony. That summer, Wells Fargo sued him for $16 million over a failed real estate investment. The Starbury brand was gone. The lawsuits were stacking. The city that had raised him on a pedestal declared him, in the words of the New York Daily News, the most reviled athlete in town. In July 2009, he turned on a camera and streamed himself for nearly 24 hours. Weeping, answering strangers' questions, eating Vaseline as a home remedy for a sore throat. The internet turned it into memes. Sports radio spent a week treating it as comedy. Not one major outlet asked the obvious question. Why is he crying? As Marbury later told HBO's Real Sports in 2015, I wanted to kill myself some days. I did. His wife Latasha described him lying in bed all day, unable to move, disappearing. The machine that had monetized his highlights for 13 years had no protocol for his suffering, only mockery. In January 2010, he received an email from the Shaanxi Brave Dragons in China's Basketball Association. He almost said no. Then he thought about the silence where a career used to be and said yes. When he landed at Taiyuan Airport, hundreds of fans were waiting. He stood there and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Being genuinely wanted. In Beijing, signed with the Ducks in 2011, he refused to treat it like exile. He rode the subway with commuters, ate in the team canteen, learned Mandarin phrases, and personally replied to thousands of fan messages on Sina Weibo. The Ducks won their first championship in 19 years of franchise history. 2 more titles followed in 2014 and 2015, when Marbury was named Finals MVP at 38. A bronze statue was erected in his honor. The Chinese government granted him permanent residency, only the 5th American basketball player ever to receive one, and Beijing named him an honorary citizen. What really happened to Stefan Marbury? Coney Island taught him one thing above all else. Basketball is survival, your value is what you produce, and weakness is not an option. That lesson carried him to the NBA and earned him $150 million. It also destroyed him because no one, not the league, not the Knicks, not the media, not the people closest to him, ever replaced it with something more complete. Something that accounted for grief, for betrayal, for the loneliness of being discarded by the city that raised you. Today he is 48 years old, worth an estimated $40 million, remarried in April 2025 to Chinese singer Wang Yuling, and still living in Beijing. In America, people remember the Vaseline video. In China, they remember everything that came after. Stephon Marbury just needed someone to catch him. He had to travel 10,000 miles to find them.